Ever wondered how AWS Dynamo DB works? It's a question many have asked, and today we're going to answer it. AWS Dynamo DB, standing for Amazon Web Services Dynamo Database, is a significant player in the field of cloud computing. It's a NoSQL database service that offers seamless scalability, allowing developers to deal with data management in the most efficient way possible. This powerhouse, DynamoDB, is designed to provide lightning-fast performance, handling data at any scale, be it a few hundred gigabytes or petabytes. It's all about delivering low-latency data access, making it a popular choice for many tech giants worldwide. The beauty of DynamoDB lies in its versatility, its ability to adapt to different types of applications, from gaming to ad tech to IoT, you name it. It's this adaptability that makes DynamoDB a standout service in AWS's comprehensive suite. Now that we have a basic understanding, let's delve into the nitty-gritty of AWS DynamoDB. Getting started with AWS DynamoDB is quite straightforward. Let's begin by discussing what you need to have in place before you can start setting up DynamoDB. First off, you need a functioning AWS account. If you don't have one, don't worry. It's as simple as visiting the AWS homepage, clicking Create an AWS account, and following the prompts. Keep in mind that you'll need a valid email address and credit card for the setup process. Once your account is up and running, the next step is to find the DynamoDB service. AWS has a lot of services, but finding DynamoDB is a breeze. At the top of your AWS Management Console, there's a Services drop-down menu. Click on it, and you'll see a list of all AWS services. You can either scroll down to Database and select DynamoDB, or you can just type DynamoDB in the service search bar. Either way, you'll land on the DynamoDB dashboard, the command center for all your DynamoDB operations. Now that we're on the DynamoDB dashboard, it's time to create a DynamoDB table, the basic building block of any DynamoDB application. But before you jump in, it's important to note that DynamoDB is a NoSQL database service. So, unlike traditional SQL database services, DynamoDB doesn't require a predefined schema. Instead, each item in a DynamoDB table is a collection of key value pairs, making DynamoDB extremely flexible and adaptable to your data. Setting up a DynamoDB table is a matter of clicking on the Create Table button and following the prompts. You'll need to provide a table name and define the primary key, which uniquely identifies each item in your table. Everything else, like secondary indexes and provision throughput, is optional and can be configured later. Once you've set up AWS DynamoDB, you're ready to explore its powerful features. In the next scene, we'll dive deeper into the structure of DynamoDB and how it differs from traditional SQL databases. Stay tuned. AWS DynamoDB has a unique structure that makes it stand out, and today we'll be delving into the nuts and bolts of this structure. At the heart of DynamoDB are tables. Now, if you've worked with databases before, you might be thinking of rows and columns, but with DynamoDB, it's a bit different. Here, we deal with items and attributes. Think of a table as a large container. Inside this container, you have smaller boxes, which are the items. Each item, in turn, holds various properties or characteristics. We call these properties attributes. Each attribute has a name and a value. The value can be a number, a string, a binary, a boolean, or even a list or a map. Now, let's talk about primary keys, a crucial part of the DynamoDB structure. Every item in a DynamoDB table must have a primary key. This primary key could be a simple primary key consisting of one attribute known as the partition key, or it could be a composite primary key composed of two attributes, the partition key and the sort key. Primary keys are what DynamoDB uses to uniquely identify each item in a table and distribute the items evenly across multiple partitions. This distribution plays a crucial role in DynamoDB's ability to scale seamlessly and deliver consistent, fast performance. Then, we have secondary indexes. These are like shortcuts that allow you to access your data in different ways, providing fast access to data based on attributes other than the primary key. With DynamoDB, you have the flexibility to create two types of secondary indexes, global secondary indexes and local secondary indexes. Global secondary indexes let you query over the entire table using an alternate key, while local secondary indexes allow you to query over a subset of data within a partition key. Understanding the structure of AWS DynamoDB is vital to using it effectively. With this knowledge, you're now better equipped to work with DynamoDB and leverage its full potential in your cloud applications. Creating a table in AWS DynamoDB is a simple process. Let's get right into it. First, from your AWS Management Console, navigate to the DynamoDB service. Here, click on the Create Table button. This will open up a new dialog box, and this is where we'll specify our table details. Begin by naming your table. Remember, this should be unique within each AWS account and region. Next, you'll need to select a primary key, which is crucial to the DynamoDB structure. The primary key uniquely identifies each item in the table, so it's important to choose wisely. It's a combination of two elements, the partition key and the sort key. The partition key is used to distribute data across multiple partitions for scalability and performance. The sort key, on the other hand, is used to sort items within a partition. Once you've selected your primary key, you'll have an option to add additional indexes. These are optional, but they can improve performance when querying data. Now it's time to configure settings. You can choose to use default settings, which are recommended for beginners, or customize them based on your requirements. This includes selecting the capacity mode, enabling DynamoDB streams, and setting up encryption. Once you're satisfied with your settings, click Create. AWS DynamoDB will then work its magic, and within a few moments, your table will be ready. But wait, we're not done just yet. After creating the table, it's always a good idea to review the table details. This includes the table name, primary key, indexes, and settings. If there's anything you'd like to modify, you can do so by clicking Edit. And there you have it. You have successfully created a table in AWS DynamoDB. It's as simple as that. Remember, the table is the core component of DynamoDB. Understanding how to create and configure a table is the first step to mastering this powerful NoSQL database service. Once you've created a table, you can start storing data in AWS DynamoDB. Storing and retrieving data in AWS DynamoDB is a breeze. It's like putting away your favorite book on a shelf and then fetching it again when you want to dive into its world. Let's start with storing data. AWS DynamoDB is a NoSQL database, meaning we deal with items and attributes instead of rows and columns. An item is like a unique book on your shelf, and each attribute is a detail about that book, the author, title, genre, and so forth. To store data, we create an item with desired attributes and put it into our DynamoDB table. This is done using the putitem operation. You can think of it as scanning a new book into your library's database. Now, what about updating the data? Perhaps you want to add a note about the book or change its genre. The update item operation comes to our rescue. It allows us to modify existing items in our table without having to re-enter all the details. Retrieving data from DynamoDB is as straightforward as storing it. You can use the getItem operation to fetch a specific item. It's like asking the librarian for your favorite book and them knowing exactly where it is. But what if you don't know the exact book you're looking for? Maybe you want a list of all books by a certain author or in a specific genre. In such cases, we use queries. Queries in DynamoDB allow us to fetch multiple items based on specific conditions. It's like asking the librarian for recommendations based on your preferences. Remember, DynamoDB is designed for speed and flexibility. Whether you're storing, updating, or retrieving data, DynamoDB ensures that your operations are swift and efficient. It's like having a super librarian who can fetch any book in a flash. In a nutshell, storing and retrieving data in DynamoDB is like managing a library. You add books, update their details, fetch them when needed, and even get recommendations. Storing and retrieving data is a fundamental operation in AWS DynamoDB. just like reading is to a library. We've covered a lot of ground today about AWS DynamoDB. Let's quickly jog our memory on the key points we've discussed. We began by introducing AWS DynamoDB, painting a clear picture of what it is and why it's a powerful tool for cloud engineers. Then we dived into setting it up, demystifying the process and showing that it's not as complicated as it might seem. We took a deep dive into understanding its structure, breaking it down into digestible parts, and showing how everything fits together. Next, we moved on to creating a table in AWS DynamoDB, a crucial step in making the most out of this service. Lastly, we learned about storing and retrieving data, the heart of any database system. With this knowledge, you're well on your way to mastering AWS DynamoDB. Keep exploring and happy cloud computing.